Well, hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the political journalist Zoe Grunewald and the former Conservative Special Advisor Salma Shah. Welcome and lovely to see both of you. So, as ever, let us check out the front pages. Trump to Zelensky, your time's almost up. That's the front page of the Telegraph, leading with Donald Trump's latest warning to Ukraine's president to get on board for a peace deal or else. Let's take a look at the Daily Mail. Trump, I won't put up with Zelensky for much longer. According to The Guardian, the rift between the US and Ukraine is growing wider than ever. The Times reports on Trump's remarks earlier, criticising Europe for showing what he called weakness over the issue. The Eye reports that Britain is approaching Middle East countries, joining any peacekeeping mission in Ukraine once a deal with Russia is agreed. The Financial Times says Europe's biggest powers are supporting moves to use more than 200 billion euros of frozen Russian assets to help support any ceasefire. While the Daily Express quotes Sir Keir Starmer saying the UK must lead from the front to stop what it calls the Russia menace. The UK Information Commissioner's investigation into how social media platform TikTok uses children's data and separate allegations that it's made money from streaming underage pornography is the top story for the Metro. While the Star tells us about chatbots, which apparently will soon be doing so much of our day-to-day work for us that we'll have to be paid to do nothing. Won't do this. It's going to be fine. Zoe and Salma are here. We live in extraordinary times. The headlines, has to be said, on the Trump-Zelensky relationship is somewhat depressing. But Donald Trump has subsequently spoken, and I suppose the heartening bit of news is that he had not considered yet pulling current aid to Ukraine and praised European leaders as good people. Most of them are my friends. So, you know, it's minute by minute, isn't it, in Trump world?
Well, I think this speaks to what we've always talked about in relation to Trump, which is that he can be incredibly erratic. And I think that this is a real example of that. Although it does feel a little bit like we're getting to perhaps some brinkmanship, because you've got Zelensky on one hand saying that we're very, very far away from a peace deal. Trump then coming in and saying, you know, is this man even interested in peace? Some people, you know, some of my old colleagues in Washington have said that perhaps this is a way, if you were being generous to Trump, this is a way to get Russia around the table. Might not be any other way of doing it. But I think a lot of people, particularly in Europe, are incredibly horrified at the way that this has gone down, and this kind of constant criticism of what used to be a Ukraine ally in the US, I think is still going to be troubling a lot of European leaders. And
the point that Trump seems to be trying to make now with regard to Zelensky is that he is the impediment to peace, effectively. The quote in the Daily Telegraph here, if somebody doesn't want to make a deal, I think that person won't be around very long. That person will not be listened to very long because I believe that Russia wants to make a deal. So if he's being billed now as the impediment, what happens to Zelensky? And does that make it harder for the relationship, which faltered so terribly, as we saw on Friday, to be rebuilt?
I think it's absolutely right that the comments we've seen from Trump and the way that Trump has handled much of this this kind of ceasefire deal and this attempt at peace points to him being erratic. But I also think it points to his need for control. And I think we saw how the conversation went down in the White House between Zelensky and J.D. Vance and Trump on Friday was a real indication of how quickly things can disintegrate if Trump feels that somebody is trying to take control of the situation. You know, he really didn't like Zelensky's comments. And, you know, there is also this real question about Trump's relationship with Russia. You know, is he really trying in good faith to do a deal between Russia and Ukraine, or is he in Russia's pocket? And I think it very much feels like at the moment that he is doing much more appeasement towards Russia than he is Ukraine. And that is a massive concern for European leaders, because although, you know, there is that more generous interpretation that that is a way of getting Putin round the table, that is a way of building relations with Putin so that they can proceed to a ceasefire, there is a worry that that will empower Putin. And even if a ceasefire is agreed, he may well come back for more.
Well, he was asked that specifically, was he not? That question, not in these words, are you a Russian apologist, effectively? And he said, look what happened under George Bush. You know, they tried to take Georgia. Look what happened under Obama. Crimea was taken. Look what happened under Joe Biden. Russia tried to take the lot under me, that didn't happen. So that's become his argument with that accusation.
Yeah, there are some people, I mean, even in the coverage that we'll see in tomorrow's papers, there is that idea that, you know, even Putin might be slightly getting worried about Trump's becoming erratic. But there is a point that is actually made in the front page of The Telegraph, which is about the Institute of the Study of War, a US think tank, that's saying that any kind of breach or any kind of difficulty that you see with the Allies' relationship, Putin is only going to be grateful for that. So I think this idea of kind of the West pulling away from each other in their traditional alliances, it's all grist to the mill for Russia. That's not to say that there aren't people in the US that support Trump's point of view. And as you say, this is not something that has just happened in the last few years. This is a long time coming. The Russians would argue this about NATO's creep around Russia. So it's actually a lot more complicated than we think, but there is a binary thing here in that we cannot appease an aggressor.
And the fracturing of the West is exactly what Putin had been hoping for. That's what the bot farms are out to do, aren't they? There's The Guardian. US rift with Ukraine grows as Europe seeks a ceasefire. Clearly, Volodymyr Zelensky is nervous about a ceasefire. He signed up to agreements in the past, which is the point he was trying to make to Trump and Vance on Friday. And we saw what happened with that invasion in February 2022. The Eye, meanwhile, suggesting that the UK is hunting new allies to keep Putin at bay. You know, this is about spheres of influence, isn't it? And keeping this coalition of the willing, which included Canada, it seems, at the weekend, together.
Yeah, so there's a suggestion in here that Britain will look beyond the traditional kind of Western NATO allies to try and look at how they might grapple with the powers needed to enforce a Ukraine ceasefire. And the suggestion is this could go as far as the Middle East, Jordan, Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. My understanding is these particular countries haven't been confirmed by Number 10, but this is the suggestion that these are the kind of places they might look at because there are those relationships already built there, both between the UK and these countries and also between Russia and these countries, and that might be the way to get Putin round the table, you know, approaching a ceasefire. But of course, those countries don't come without their own issues and their own, you know, there are obviously human rights concerns in these countries. There's all sorts of issues about the money and the sphere of power and how the governments work in those countries as well, which I think will worry some politicians here in the UK. But it is absolutely the case that if the UK doesn't feel like they can rely on the US, it makes sense that they would look to bolster that ceasefire with other countries away from the West.
And that's where the pulling of overseas aid has such an impact on the idea of soft power and influence. US aid being pulled, UK aid now being pulled too because of the need to spend more on defence. I mean, these things don't happen overnight, but people remember, don't they?
Oh, no, indeed. And also there is this idea of kind of the soft power that we've been so proud of for the last decade. I mean, I remember being on trade missions to China, selling Wallace and Gromit, you know, and the idea of kind of like English culture and English media, you know, being out there and really taken by, not so much India, but certainly the Chinese, and that being our way into the new world. And we are drifting back into hard power. So the idea that aid is going to be spent on military defences is certainly a ginormous shift. The thing that's interesting about this front page, though, and as Zoe says, we need to understand whether it's going to be confirmed, is when there is regional conflict already with Israel and Gaza, why would a country like Saudi Arabia or Jordan move their resources to focus on something that's happening in Europe? So I really would like to understand the details of this. Is it because we are now recognising bigger power that's taking place in Saudi with more capital, more energy, a younger population that exists out there in the East and asking them to play a bigger role? Is this Western countries asking them to contribute troops in a peacekeeping mission? I think it would be very interesting to see the detail of this, because this is a real huge shift in what we've understood as the dominant world order thus far.
Yes, and one line there, inside the paper, even Putin is unnerved by Trump's erratic, thuggish approach. So there we are, we live in hope, I guess, don't we? But, you know, the point being made by some that we're seeing spheres of influence fracture and then reform in different shapes. You'll have the European sphere, you know, the North American sphere, minus Canada by the sound of it, obviously with tariffs coming up at midnight US time, and then the China China sphere over Asia. So we're starting to see a realignment of the world order, which is truly dramatic, which is what many people thought when they were watching those 10 minutes of horror in the Oval Office last week. In the meantime, should we go to the Financial Times as well? Europeans move towards seizing the 200 billion euros worth of frozen Russian assets. I think they've been spending the interest on this, haven't they? But, you know, what to do with this frozen assets and what the city and other financial institutions would feel if those were then taken and spent, whether that, you know, ruins reputational trust, I don't know. But it's interesting nonetheless.
It is, because it's a sort of new, you know, it goes back to that thing you were saying about the new world order and the new spheres of influence. You know, this is a suggestion, and there is a... So you're absolutely right that the current frozen assets, the profits and the proceeds have been used, but the assets themselves are more complicated. It's not straightforward. You can't just... You know, it might be that it sets a whole new legal precedent. It might be in contravention of international law. There's also concerns about what it might do to the euro, what it might do to international markets. But there is this real movement towards, actually, could this be the key to making sure that Russia does adhere to a ceasefire? You know, if it feels that that money can be taken and used to...
Oh, you mean just as a threat, not actually to fund military?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there is... But it's something that would be unprecedented and that we haven't really seen before. And I think, especially for Keir Starmer talking about it, you know, I think he understands that there is a kind of a moral feeling that this might be the right thing to do. But, you know, he is a former human rights lawyer, so he's going to obviously be concerned about, is this going to break international law? Is this something we want to proceed with?
Very, very quick thought on that, then?
Well, I think it's within reason to be able to discuss how you might use this frozen assets, but there are really serious implications about foreign wealth being able to be retrieved from safe havens and banks in Europe.
Yeah, it's something that seems like a very simple answer, but is actually a very big deal, isn't it, really? Yeah. Lots more still to come in the next part of our programme, including an investigation into disturbing allegations about the use of TikTok, or misuse, rather, of children's data, and worse. Back in a moment.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
Once almost lost, these denizens of the deep are back. The problem for these whales is global warming. Water temperatures are rising.
We're worried that the animals are actually starting to starve.
Deadly and outdated. What do you think should happen to the nets?
I would like to see them go.
I'm Nicole Johnston, Sky's Asia correspondent, based here in Beijing. A towering monument to the China dream and its demise. From one end of this country to the other, China is littered with real estate that's falling apart. China is facing a tsunami of the elderly.
We have to work as long as health allows, otherwise, no money.
China is under pressure to pay for the pensions of 500 million retirees. I've reported on a wide range of stories from around the world. Mass protests forced the president to flee. The sight of the president's private swimming pool only reinforces to Sri Lankans the great divide here between rich and poor. Aid groups say Gaza is now the world's most dangerous place to be a child. The Israeli army has raided towns and villages all over the West Bank. These tunnels run all over Gaza. The Gaza Strip is ridden with them. A referendum designed to unite the country has only deepened its divide. Sydney's floodplains underwater again. This is the third or fourth time in 18 months that their homes have gone under. Sky News, the full story first. It may seem like a gimmicky toy, but it is part of the global race between the United States and China for new technology. This elite engineering designed to humour and to help us.
We are under
Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview with me once again, Zoe Grunewald and Salma Shah. Welcome back to both of you. Zoe, why don't you take us to the Metro? This is a probe, a child sex probe into TikTok and its use or misuse. Tell us more.
Yeah, so there's a suggestion that, well, there's two suggestions here. The first is how children's data is being used or misused by TikTok, but the other is this separate probe that has revealed that TikTok is earning money by live streaming performances by young girls. And these are kind of sexual performances where it sounds like men are giving them gifts and on TikTok, and therefore TikTok is collecting the proceeds. So there's just lots of questions about whether TikTok is doing its due diligence protecting young people. We know that TikTok is a platform that mostly caters to young people, to children, and it sounds like they don't have the protections in place. So they talk about one 17-year-old girl in Kenya who talked about selling herself on TikTok, dancing naked. She said she was just 15 when a friend showed her how to bypass the restrictions on the site. So clearly, these social media companies are not doing what many politicians hope they would just do from an ethical or moral perspective, which was just put in protections in place to keep children safe, if they're financing, if they are able to make a profit from it.
Yes, indeed. And you have related that to the picture of Melania Trump on the front page of The Telegraph, who has chosen what as her focus?
Revenge porn and deep fakes. And I seem to recall that, you know, there were pictures of Melania Trump that were circulated around the internet the first time her husband was president. So she's taken this up, as First Ladies often do, take up campaigns. And it's interesting that actually that theme of internet safety, internet protection, not only is going through the legislative tracks like the TikTok data crackdown, but also something that people want to bring a lot of awareness to. And I think that as we progress with various forms of technology, particularly generative AI that produces these deep fakes, I think this is going to become a bigger issue. So interesting that she's opted for that, and interesting that she's opted for that as her husband's being supported by many tech billionaires, as it seems.
Yes, indeed. Keep them all in check. There we are. Good luck with that one. In the meantime, down the bottom of the Daily Telegraph, we've just got a couple of minutes left. So 3 out of 4 people will be overweight or obese by 2050.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. There's a suggestion that obesity is going to rise across the world, but particularly in the UK by 2050, it'll be 3 in 4 adults. And obviously this really throws into perspective the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting's plans. He's talked a lot about the cost of obesity on the NHS. He says it's about 6.5 billion per year, and it's the second biggest preventable cause of cancer. So I think this is really going to be top of the Health Secretary's agenda. You know, how will he encourage people to take control of their health and bring those obesity rates down, because otherwise we're going to see further strain on our health service.
I'm going to move on, unless you've got, yes, which is to the Daily Star. Already we saw the music industry really concerned about AI. So far it seems that our creative industries are being taken over by AI and we're left to do the cleaning. But anyway, they say this is the rise of the robo-lackeys, as they put it.
Yes, but it seems like we're going to have to be paid to do nothing whilst the robo-lackeys take over. And so there's an idea of something called a universal basic income.
That's right. It's been around for a while.
That's going to take hold. Well, I'm not sure I really like the idea of this. Perhaps we'll all have to become Luddites and stop the advance of AI and robots and anything else.
Smash them out,
yes. Exactly.
The one-day working week has been a thing for a while, though, hasn't it? And I think, you know...
it's probably why our tax receipts are in such a terrible state at the moment. I don't think we need robots for people to do one-day working weeks, I'm afraid.
Both of you. On that note, it's time to say thank you for the moment, anyway. Zoe, Salma, see you shortly. Thank you very much indeed. Let's see what the weather's doing. It's been nice so far, hasn't it? And the next few days...
A bright start and always a warm welcome. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Yes, the next few days will be largely dry and settled, although the northwest will be wet and windy at times. Tomorrow will be mostly fine at first, but southern Britain will see an extensive frost and some patchy fog, especially over parts of Wales and the southeast. Scotland will be cloudier and milder with patchy drizzle in the northwest. The morning will be dry and sunny for most, with cloud over Scotland tending to break and early fog gradually lifting. Northwest Scotland, though, will remain dull and damp. Temperatures, much like today's, windy in the northwest with coastal gales. Northwestern parts of both Britain and Ireland will see patchy drizzle, giving way to more general rain during the afternoon. Most other places, though, fine into the evening, but the wind will pick up in many northern and western areas. Wednesday, dry and sunny in the south, while Scotland, Northern Ireland and the northwest of Ireland will be mostly cloudy and windy with outbreaks of rain, and it will be warmer for many of us.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.